I was halfway through my shift when Madison's voice cracked through the radio. It was 9:14 p.m., quiet enough that every call felt heavier than it should have. She said a farmer up north had reported a stranger running across his yard, cutting straight into the tree line without a word. No description, no vehicle, nothing, just a silhouette moving fast. We were already close, so Ryan swung the cruiser around while Cole pulled up the map on his phone. The roads out there narrow fast, turning into gravel that disappears between patches of pine. By the time we reached the property, the farmer was standing on his porch with a flashlight shaking in his hand. He pointed toward the woods. I didn't hear everything he said, just enough. He ran that way, didn't even look back. The footprints were faint, just soft dents in the patchy dirt, but they were fresh. We followed them past the tree line and through a thin stretch of brush until they faded under dead leaves. A few yards ahead, the silhouette of an old structure came into view. No signs, no markings, just a broad, low warehouse slumped against the edge of the woods, like it had been abandoned for years. Inside, the air dropped immediately. Not cool, cold. Cold in a way that didn't match the night. My breath didn't fog, but something in my chest tightened as if the temperature had dipped faster than my body could follow. Ryan muttered something behind me. His voice sounded smaller than usual in the emptiness. We split up just enough to cover the floor. Dust, pallets, old crates, nothing touched in a long time. Toward the back, a narrow stairway led down into a darker room. The rail was rusted, and the concrete steps were chipped. I took a few careful steps downward. That's when I saw it. A small animal, maybe a cat, maybe a possum, lying on its side near the base of the stairs. Completely dried out. Skin pulled tight around bone, no smell, no sign of decay. Like whatever killed it had done it fast. Too fast. I stepped down one more stair, and the temperature on my shins dropped hard enough that my knees locked. Another step. Another drop. Sharp, clean cold, sinking straight through the fabric of my uniform. I stopped breathing for a second. Nothing moved below. No sound, no intruder. "Tyler, anything?" Ryan called from the floor above. "Nothing," I said, though the word felt wrong the moment it left my mouth. We regrouped, swept the rest of the building, and found no one, not even a spot where someone might have hidden. It didn't make sense, but the call wasn't strong enough to justify staying longer. We cleared the scene and stepped back outside into warmer air. But as I closed the warehouse door behind me, the cold from the stairwell stayed in my chest, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been standing just out of sight at the bottom of those stairs, quiet, patient, watching me the whole time. My shift ended closer to sunrise than I wanted. That's normal for me. Working nights for the means the hours blur together, and the world feels dim long after the sun comes up. I've been doing this long enough that fatigue doesn't feel like a problem anymore. It feels like a roommate, always there, always humming in the background. Harrison County Sheriff's Office. I parked the cruiser, signed off on the call log, and tried to shake the warehouse out of my head. I told myself it was routine. A cold basement, a dead animal, nothing supernatural, nothing dangerous, just one of those strange rural calls that every deputy ends up dealing with when the county gets quiet enough for the dark to feel louder than it should. Still, I kept thinking about how the temperature dropped in steps, how my breath had felt tight even though the air wasn't freezing, how it felt like something stood at the bottom of that stairwell even when the flashlight showed nothing there. When I walked into the break room, Cole was already there, pouring coffee that smelled like burnt tires. "You look dead, Tyler," he said. "Just tired," I answered. Ryan leaned into the doorway behind him, rubbing his eyes. "You sure that's all?" I shrugged. That was easier than trying to explain the way my stomach tightened when I thought about those stairs. There are things you say to your team without thinking, and there are things you don't say because they sound wrong even in your own head. This fell into the second category. The three of us talked for a bit. Nothing serious, just shift chatter. Calls we still had to write up. A joke about the vending machine stealing quarters again. It grounded me, reminded me that the world was still normal, even if I didn't feel entirely normal inside it. When I finally made it home, the house felt unusually still. Morning light drifted through the blinds like it didn't want to wake anything. I slept a few hours, woke up thirsty, and lay there listening to the hum of the refrigerator. Sometimes night shift makes you sensitive to quiet, like you can hear the absence of noise more than noise itself. By the time I got back to the office, the sun was up, and everything smelled like coffee and paperwork. Madison was already on dispatch, headset on, tapping her pen against her notebook. She looked up when I walked in. "How'd it go last night?" she asked. "We didn't find anyone," I said. "Probably just someone cutting through the property." "You don't sound convinced." "Yeah, well, long night." She gave a small nod. Madison had this way of accepting whatever you said without pushing, even when she didn't buy it. Later in the afternoon, the phone rang again. Same farmer, same shaky tone. He said, "I heard something dragging across the ground, not like boots, heavier." I asked him a few questions, noise direction, timing, whether he saw an animal, but he kept insisting it sounded like something long being pulled across dry dirt. I told him we'd log it and check the area again if needed. Another hour passed before Lucas stopped by the station. He's one of those guys who always looks like he's been awake for more hours than anyone should be. "Tyler," he said, "you were out near that old building last night, right?" "Yeah." "My headlights dimmed when I drove past it, just for a second, like the world went darker." Ryan overheard him and smirked. "It's West Virginia, man. Half the county wiring is from the 70s. Lucas shook his head. This wasn't wiring. It felt colder there, just for that spot, like the truck drove into a pocket of air that didn't belong. I felt something shift in my stomach when he said that. I kept busy the rest of the afternoon, reports, inventory, the usual, but my focus drifted. Every time I blinked, I saw the warehouse door, the darkness below the stairs, that strange cold. When the shift ended, I went to grab my jacket from my locker. It was exactly where I'd left it, folded over my bag. But when I picked it up, one sleeve felt heavier. It was damp, not soaked, not stained, just damp like it had absorbed water from thin air. I pressed my fingers into the fabric and felt a cold that didn't match the room. Ryan walked by at the exact wrong moment. "Condensation?" he asked. "It wasn't like this morning," I said. He paused, concerned for maybe half a second, then shrugged it off. "Weird weather lately." Weird weather. If only it had been that simple. I put the jacket on, and the damp sleeve clung to my arm in a way that made me feel watched, not by a person, by the memory of that basement, by the cold I couldn't explain, by the sense that something had been standing just beyond the light. Night settled in slowly. The sky over Harrison County turns this deep blue that bleeds into black without warning. Cole checked the cruiser. Ryan ran through dispatch updates. Madison called out that we were starting the shift officially. Everything looked normal. Everything sounded normal, but I didn't feel normal. My eyes drifted to the county map pinned above our gear rack, to the blank space north of the river where that warehouse sat alone, to the tree line that swallowed footprints without giving anything back. That place wasn't finished with me. I felt it in my chest, in the quiet, in the cold sleeve of my jacket. I didn't tell anyone, but I knew exactly what I was doing tonight. I was going back, and this time I wasn't stopping at the stairs. I drove back to the farm the next afternoon, telling myself it was just follow-up work. Nothing more. Deputy Tyler Shaw, checking a few boxes, making sure the farmer didn't call again tonight. That's what I kept repeating, even though something deeper tugged at me the entire drive north, like a string pulling at my ribs. The property looked different in daylight, not safer, just exposed. The trees at the edge of the yard stood still, but the shadows between them felt thicker than they should have been. The farmer stepped out onto his porch when he saw my cruiser. "You came back," he said, sounding relieved. "I just want to look around," I told him. "Shouldn't take long." He nodded and stayed on the porch like he had no intention of getting anywhere near the tree line again. I started where the stranger had supposedly crossed the yard. The ground was soft and uneven, but I could still see the faint impressions from last night. I walked the same path we'd taken in the dark, slow, careful, watching the dirt for details we'd missed. The footprints led right up to the old warehouse, but they didn't go inside. They stopped directly in front of the door, not turning, not doubling back, just stopping, as if the person vanished on the spot. That bothered me more than I expected. I crouched, tracing the outline of one print with my finger. It looked normal, same weight, same stride, nothing irregular. There should have been at least one partial print just inside the doorway. Dust, grime, something. But there was nothing. Inside, the air felt still, like yesterday's cold had been holding its breath. I ran my hand along a metal support beam near the entrance. The surface was dry in a way that didn't match the room, flaky, brittle, like rusted iron that had been sun-bleached for months. I scraped my thumb across it, and the metal crumbled into a powder so soft it disappeared when I blew on it. That wasn't natural, not for a building like this. I walked deeper in, letting my flashlight follow the same path we took the night before. Everything smelled old, wood dust, oil residue, dead air, but underneath it was something sterile, something too clean, a dryness that made my nose sting. The stairway looked the same, but I didn't feel the cold yet. I took one step down, then another. On the third step, the temperature dropped again, not as sharp as last night, but noticeable, like stepping into the shadow of a freezer. I exhaled, and a thin cloud of vapor left my mouth. The air up here was warm, but my breath fogged. That shouldn't happen. I reached the base of the stairs, and that's when I froze. A second animal corpse lay on the concrete, small, maybe a squirrel, maybe something else. Hard to tell because it had the same dried-out appearance as the one from last night. Skin tight, no decay, no smell, just emptied. And I knew, absolutely knew, it hadn't been here before. I knelt slowly, careful not to touch it. The concrete around the body was cold enough that a thin frost glazed the edges, but only in a small circle. Beyond that circle, the basement temperature felt normal again, a perfect boundary. It was like stepping into a series of invisible pockets, warm, cold, with no source, no machinery, nothing physical to explain it. My flashlight flickered when I turned toward the far wall. Only once, but enough to raise every hair on my arm. The beam grew dimmer for a second, as though the light had to push through thicker air. Then it brightened again. I tightened my grip on the flashlight. A thought crept up on me, quiet but persistent. The warehouse wasn't reacting to us. It was reacting to something else, something we hadn't seen yet. I tried to reason my way through it like a cop should. Underground gas pockets? Maybe, but the temperature drop didn't follow any sensible airflow. Faulty wiring, no electricity down here. Some weird chemical reaction. It didn't fit the dryness pattern. I stood there longer than I should have, breathing slowly, listening for anything out of place. But the room held steady, silent, still, too still. When I finally stepped back up the staircase, the warm air hit me like a wave. My skin prickled, and my throat felt suddenly tight. I wasn't scared. Not exactly. but something inside me shifted, a small gear turning, nudging everything else out of alignment. I drove back to the station without turning on the radio. The silence helped me think, or tried to. The problem was, every time I replayed the scene in my head, the pieces didn't fit. Nothing I'd seen lined up with a natural explanation. I found Ryan and Cole in the parking lot as the sky darkened. Cole leaned on the cruiser, tapping the hood with his knuckles. Ryan looked up when I approached. "You went back alone?" he asked. "Just to check a few things," I said. Cole frowned. "And?" I hesitated, then said, "There's something off about that place." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Off how?" "The footprints stop at the door, like whoever we chased never went in. But inside, things are changing. Metal's brittle. There was another animal down there that wasn't there last night." Cole's expression tightened. "Another one?" "Yeah." Ryan crossed his arms. "Gas pockets? Chemical runoff?" "No," I said. "It's something else." They didn't say anything for a few seconds. Just looked at me. Looked at the woods behind me. Looked at each other. Cole finally broke the silence. "You want to go back?" It wasn't a question. I nodded. "Tonight, but we need to check deeper, past the stairs all the way down." Ryan sighed through his nose, the way he always did when he knew he was about to agree with something he didn't like. "All right," he said, "we'll go." Cole pushed off the hood. "But this time," he said, "we stick together." The sun dipped below the ridge. The temperature shifted. A low wind moved across the parking lot, brushing over us like a warning. I looked north, toward the dark line of trees. The warehouse was waiting, and we were going back. We reached the warehouse a little before midnight. The woods around it were still, the air heavy with that strange quiet you feel right before a storm. Except the sky was clear. No wind, no sound, nothing moving except the beam of our flashlights brushing across the dirt. Ryan clicked off the engine. "Last chance, Tyler." "I'm going in," I said. Cole tightened his vest. "Then we're all going in." We crossed the open ground in a tight line, shoulders brushing now and then. Nobody said much. I could hear my heartbeat tapping in my ears, too fast, too loud. The warehouse looked the same as before, slumped, empty. But something about it felt deeper now, like the darkness inside had weight. When we stepped through the doorway, the temperature shifted, not instantly cold, just wrong. A dryness that hit the back of my throat and made me swallow hard. Ryan swept his light across the floor. "Same as last time," he muttered. "No," I said. "It feels worse." We moved toward the stairs. The beam of my flashlight trembled along the rails, catching dust, old bolts, rusted screws. Every sound we made echoed back too softly, as if the air wasn't carrying it right. I didn't like that. Sound should travel clean in a place this empty. Cole whispered, "Something's messing with the acoustics." Ryan shot him a look. "Keep your voice down." We descended the first set of stairs. The temperature fell in small drops again, like invisible steps of cold air. My skin prickled beneath my uniform. I forced myself to keep breathing evenly. At the bottom, the basement stretched wider than I remembered. The concrete walls seemed to swallow our lights. Ryan swept his beam across the far side. "That panel," he said. A sheet of metal leaned outward from the wall, bent, warped, like something had pushed through from the inside. We hadn't noticed it last time. Cole stepped closer. "It's covering a passage." He tugged it gently. The metal groaned and curled a little more, revealing a narrow corridor behind it. The air that spilled out made my lips crack. "You feel that?" I asked. "Yeah," Ryan said quietly. "It's dry as hell." The corridor was barely wide enough for us to move single file. The walls were stripped concrete, rough, flecked with that brittle powder I'd seen earlier. Cole took point. I followed. Ryan stayed behind us, watching the rear. The deeper we went, the more the dryness built. My tongue felt thick. My eyes burned. It wasn't cold anymore. It was worse. It felt like the air wanted something from me, something it wasn't supposed to have. About 20 feet in, I heard it, a faint sound, soft and steady, like something sliding along the wall ahead. Cole stopped. "Did you hear that?" Ryan whispered, "Yeah, keep moving." We stepped forward slowly, careful with each footfall. The sliding sound faded, then returned on our left, closer than before. My flashlight beam jittered when my hand twitched. "Tyler," Ryan said behind me, "your light's dimming." He was right. The beam was thinning, like it had to fight to stay bright. I tapped the flashlight, but it didn't help. Cole lifted a rusted metal bar lying against the wall. "If something jumps out, I swear." The bar cracked. Not from force, from him simply lifting it. It snapped in half and crumbled like dried bark. Cole stared at the pieces in his hand. "What the hell?" "It's the air," I said. "It's pulling moisture from everything." Ryan swallowed. "Including us?" The sliding sound returned, this time from behind us. We spun, but the corridor remained empty, just a tunnel of receding gray. Cole's breathing picked up. Let's just check the end and get out." We moved again, quieter now, breath shallow. The dryness pressed on my chest like a weight. My vision shimmered at the edges. I felt dehydrated without sweating. Then Cole vanished. One blink he was ahead of me, the next he was gone around a bend we didn't see. We heard his footsteps scramble, then stop. A sharp inhale echoed down the corridor, cut off halfway. "Cole!" I shouted. "Go!" Ryan pushed me forward. We rounded the turn and found the floor empty at first. Then Ryan's flashlight caught a shape, slumped at the far edge of the corridor. Cole. He was sitting with his back against the wall, one arm twisted close to his chest. His other arm, the left, looked wrong. The skin was pale, cracked, splitting in small lines like dried riverbeds. I knelt beside him. "Cole, look at me." His eyes were wide, unfocused. "It stood right behind me," he whispered. "I couldn't see anything but the dark." Ryan scanned the hallway frantically. "It's close. I can feel it." I could feel it too. The air vibrated in a slow, steady pulse, not shaking, breathing. Something down the corridor inhaled, then exhaled, the movement faint as dust, but strong enough to raise the hair on my arms. "Cole," I said, trying to steady my voice, "you need to breathe slow. Do you hear me? Slow." He tried. His breath rattled. The sliding sound came again, closer. Not at ground level this time, higher, maybe chest height, maybe above our heads. My flashlight flickered again, then dimmed until the beam barely reached the opposite wall. Ryan's voice shook. "It's draining the air." "No," I said. "It's draining moisture." "How the hell's that better?" "It's not." Another pulse of dry air rolled over us, stronger this time. My lips cracked, my throat felt raw, and I realized something terrifying. It was following our breath. "Stop breathing fast," I whispered. "Both of you. Slow it down." Ryan glanced at me. "What? Just do it." We all inhaled slowly, held it, released it carefully. The pulse of air shifted. The sliding sound drifted backward, away from us, like whatever was there had lost track for a second. "Get him up," I said. We pulled Cole to his feet. His knees buckled, but we held him between us. Every step toward the staircase felt like walking through invisible syrup, thick, resistant. My breath wanted to speed up, panic clawing at the back of my mind, but I forced it slow. Behind us, the sliding sound returned, faster this time. "Move!" Ryan hissed. We stumbled through the corridor, scraping shoulders on the concrete walls. The dryness sharpened, biting into my nose, my throat. My flashlight sputtered again. When we reached the panel, Ryan shoved Cole through first. I followed, dragging my shoulder across the metal edge. The air outside the corridor felt slightly less hostile, but not by much. We reached the stairs, half carrying Cole. The dry wind behind us built into a steady push, like something big was gliding just out of sight, closing the distance. "Don't look back," I muttered. "Just go." We climbed fast. My legs trembled, my lungs burned. The temperature shifted halfway up, less dry, warmer, but not enough to make me breathe normally. We burst into the warehouse floor. The second my flashlight hit the open air, it brightened again. Not much, but enough. And then I felt it. Something stopped at the exact edge of the stairwell. Not a figure, not a shadow, just pressure. A presence pushing up against the boundary between the basement and the floor above, like it didn't want to cross or couldn't. Cole collapsed onto the concrete, gasping. Ryan shut the stairwell door. It didn't feel like protection. It felt like placing a sheet of paper between you and a wolf. I could still feel it below us, waiting, listening, hungry in a way I didn't understand. The warehouse wasn't empty anymore. It had never been empty. We were the ones who didn't belong there, and now it knew us. It knew our breath. It knew our moisture. It knew the shape of our fear. We had to get out before it learned anything else. I told Ryan I was going back, and I meant it. I didn't know what that said about me, but running wasn't an option. I'm not sure it ever was. Not after what happened in that corridor. Not after seeing what it did to Cole's arm. He stayed overnight at the hospital, drifting in and out, skin cracking deeper every hour. When the doctor peeled the blanket back, the look on her face told me everything. She had no idea what she was seeing. None of them did. "We shouldn't have left anything behind," I said quietly as we walked out of the ER. Ryan shook his head. "We nearly died. We left his gun, his flashlight, and if another deputy goes in there—" "I know," he said. Then after a long breath, "So we go. Just us." There wasn't anything heroic about it. It was simple. We'd opened a door we didn't understand, and it wasn't done with us. We soaked bandanas with bottled water and tied them around our faces. It felt ridiculous, but the dryness in that corridor had teeth, and anything that slowed our breath felt better than nothing. The air had taken moisture from metal, from plastic, from wood, from coal. It didn't care what the source was. "If it tracks moisture," Ryan said, "we need to confuse it." "Or hide from it," I said. He didn't answer. The silence was enough. We loaded the floodlight, the heavy industrial kind with a portable battery pack meant for crash scenes. I didn't know if it would help, but the creature had hesitated at the edge of our flashlight beams. Not because of brightness, but because the light scattered the moisture in the air. If it couldn't follow a clean trail, maybe we could buy seconds. Seconds were everything. The closer we got to the warehouse, the quieter the world became. The dirt road didn't crunch as loudly under the tires. The wind didn't push the trees. Even the insects muted themselves, as though the night held its breath for us. "Sounds wrong again," Ryan whispered. It was true. The quiet didn't feel natural. It felt absorbed. The warehouse sat in the dark like a mouth that had forgotten how to close. The door hung slightly wider than it had the night before, even though I was sure I'd pulled it shut. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. We stepped inside. No cold this time and no temperature drop. Just a dense stillness pressing against my ears. The kind of silence you feel in your teeth. We set the floodlight at the top of the stairs and angled it downward. The glow spread over the upper steps in a clean, bright wash. "That's our line," Ryan murmured. "We don't cross it on the way back." I nodded. We went down slowly. My breath already felt tight behind the wet cloth, too warm, too fast. I forced it slow, even, predictable. The air shifted the farther we moved from the floodlight, thinning in a way that had nothing to do with oxygen. It wanted something from us. I felt that in my bones. The basement was worse now. Dust curled in lazy spirals, shadows stretched where our lights didn't land. And in the middle of the floor, something small flickered under Ryan's beam. Cole's flashlight. When I picked it up, the plastic shell cracked softly in my hand, dry like old leaves, brittle enough to crumble. The battery compartment split open without effort. Ryan found the gun a few feet away. Frost shimmered along the slide in a delicate, unnatural lace. "Feel this," he whispered. I didn't want to, but I touched it anyway. The cold stung like dry ice, and then we saw the line. Both objects dragged across the floor. Not rolled, not dropped, dragged. They formed a crooked trail leading from the corridor's mouth to where they now rested, like something had pulled them closer to the stairs. Or closer to us. "That's not random," Ryan said. "No." His flashlight dimmed slightly again. He shook it. It didn't help. That's when the air shifted. Instantly, sharply. My throat burned so suddenly I coughed behind the bandana. The moisture in my breath evaporated the moment it left my mouth, disappearing into the room before I could see it. Ryan backed up fast. "It's here." The floodlight at the top of the stairs brightened and dimmed, like something large moved between us and the beam. Not something. Somewhere. A patch of darkness thickened in the far corner of the basement. Not a shape, not a silhouette, just an absence. A void that the light couldn't penetrate. It glided 1 inch to the left, paused, shifted 2 inches to the right. Searching. My chest tightened. It wasn't following heat. It wasn't following sound. It was following breath, moisture, life. Ryan whispered, "What do we do?" I looked at my glove, still damp from earlier. A stupid idea surfaced, reckless but simple. "Back up, stay behind me." He didn't argue. I peeled the glove off. The air gnawed at the moisture on my exposed fingers instantly. I threw the glove into the corner, not toward the creature, but off to the side. For half a second, nothing moved. Then the darkness buckled inward and lunged. The glove collapsed in on itself in seconds, shriveling like something desiccated under a desert sun. Ryan swore. "Jesus!" "It hunts moisture," I said, "not light, not sound." "And the light?" "It scatters moisture in the air. It's not a weapon. It's a distraction." The creature drifted again, confused, recalibrating. Its movement reminded me of something sniffing, not with a nose, but with the air itself. We backed toward the stairs, breaths held tight and shallow. Every inhale felt like stepping too close to a cliff edge. My lungs wanted to panic. My body wanted to gasp. But the second I breathed too deeply, my throat burned. It felt us, instantly. "Slow," I whispered, "just slow." Ryan nodded, jaw clenched. We moved step by step. The air behind us flickered with subtle pulses, breaths that weren't ours. Long, slow, intentional. It was following the trail we left. But the trail was thin now, thin enough to confuse. When we reached the edge of the floodlight's glow, the darkness halted. It pressed up to the bright line like a weight leaning against a wall. It didn't recoil, didn't flinch, it just stopped. As though the moisture pattern broke here, as though our presence fractured into too many scattered signals for it to track. Then it receded. Quiet, patient, almost thoughtful. We climbed the stairs fast, not running, just fast enough that fear didn't topple us. At the top, we slammed the basement door shut even though it felt pointless. A thin sheet of metal meant nothing to what lived down there. Ryan bent over, hands on his knees, gasping through the bandana. When he finally spoke, his voice shook. He said he didn't think we could kill whatever was down there. I told him he was right. Then he said trapping it wouldn't work either, and he wasn't wrong about that. After a long moment, he asked what we were supposed to do next. I didn't have an answer for him, not one that mattered, because the truth wasn't something either of us wanted to hear. It learned us. It learned our breath. It learned the shape of the water inside our bodies, and we'd only learned enough to know there was no winning. We walked out into the night with a single truth carved into our bones. It doesn't see. It doesn't hear. It feels moisture, and we are nothing but walking reservoirs. It didn't attack tonight. It didn't need to. It understood us now. Enough to wait, enough to follow, enough to survive. Cole stayed in the hospital longer than anyone expected. The doctors ran every test they could think of, but none of them could explain why his skin kept cracking, why it stayed dry no matter how much fluid they pushed into him. One of them told me it looked like severe environmental dehydration. Another said she'd never seen tissue react that fast. Nobody said the word impossible, but it hung over every conversation. I kept replaying the moment we found him in that corridor, the way the air seemed to peel moisture out of him like it had hands, like it had intent. I didn't tell the doctors that. It wouldn't have helped. When I got home that night, I tossed my gear on the table. One of my gloves, the one I'd worn on my right hand, was stiff, brittle. The leather cracked when I touched it, breaking apart like an old leaf. I set it down gently, but the damage was done. Whatever was down there had marked it, marked me. A few hours later, the farmer called again. He sounded terrified. He said the warehouse glowed for a few minutes, bright enough to cast shadows across his field, then went dark. No electricity in that building, no lights we'd ever seen inside, just a brief, silent flare that vanished as fast as it came. I didn't drive up there, not yet. I wasn't sure I'd walk out a second time. The next morning, dispatch buzzed the holding area, asking why the smell was so strange. I went back there expecting a leak, maybe something rotten someone forgot in a trash bin. Instead, I found a mouse lying on its side near the vent, dried out, skin pulled tight, empty. The power had flickered an hour earlier, just a quick outage, barely noticeable. The mouse hadn't been dead then. I knew that because I'd walked past this same vent earlier and there was nothing there. The lights dimmed in the hallway as I stood there. Just a soft pulse, just enough to make me freeze. That's when it clicked. It wasn't trapped in that warehouse anymore. It wasn't waiting in the stairwell. It wasn't confined to anything at all. It followed moisture. It followed breath. It followed whatever trace of us we left behind. The station was full of it. Air from every officer, steam from every shower, condensation on every window. A place full of life and warmth and water. A place it could feed forever. I sat in my car behind the building for a long time, watching the condensation on the windshield thin in uneven patches. Little shapes formed where the moisture should have been. Little gaps, like something invisible was testing the glass. I didn't go back inside right away. I couldn't. Because the truth was simple and terrible and already too late. It wasn't contained. It wasn't hiding. It was learning, and it was moving. I don't know where it is in this county. I just know it's still breathing in its own way.